Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about my colors on my palette before I get started here. Some colors that I am going to be using in this particular painting, this subject. I'm going to start with Indian yellow, and it is a very beautiful, transparent sort of orange golden yellow, and I'm hoping that will help me get that sense of that inner core glow there. Some other colors that I will probably be using when I get to some of the greenery is this olive green, which is a transparent color also by Rembrandt, and that I use for my darkest darks in my greens. I think that I will start out with dioxine purple with some white added to it, because otherwise dioxine purple is just practically black. The purple itself is transparent, but as soon as I add white to it, it does become more opaque. But I think I'm going to do this as my sort of sketch in place of the ultramarine blue that I often do because of the general color palette of what I've got going here. So the first thing that I am going to do is give myself a little bit of a sketch of my layout. I usually keep this pretty loose, and it may get adjusted as I go along. You can also save yourself a little bit of time by making corrections on a noten, or by doing a little thumbnail first. I don't typically do that. I think that they are an excellent idea. They just don't fit into my personality, I guess. So do it whatever works for you. Just get some of your objects laid in there and get a sense of what your composition is going to look like once you get started, and determine if that's going to work. Now would be the time to make adjustments if things don't look quite balanced or like they're going to work for you. And of course, some of this is going to be dependent on the level of importance I give to various edges in the design as I start working, as well as how I lead the viewer in with the value shifts and the color intensities. So this is just a quick sketch in of what I've got and what I'm seeing, my flowers and my leaves, and I'm kind of seeing a triangular composition happening here. But some of that will change as I determine what I'm going to do with some of this background too. So this is where we're going to start. I want to get rid of that purple. I am working, first off, this is my favorite brush for doing the sketch in or design. Forgive my dog, I don't know. She's got something about sneezing every time I start the video up. I guess she just wants attention. Wants to be a part of the video. Kind of like her version of a photo bomb. I am using a Silver Brislan Bright. This is a number 4, but it just depends on the size of painting and so on I'm working with. But what I like about these brushes is that they do hold a nice sort of wedge point to them, so they give me the opportunity to work quite a fine line if I work on the tip, or a broader stroke if I work on the edge. So I particularly do like them for doing this initial sketching and layout. Now in this particular case, because of that specific glow within the core of the flower that I want to get, I don't want that to get muddied up with other colors, so I'm going to get that established right off the bat here and see if that will help me. And I'm using that beautiful Indian yellow to fill that in. Look at that, what a pretty color that is. And that's, a combination of that transparency combined with the incredible saturation of the colors, but it is just such a gorgeous color. And that does kind of create a sense of a glow, in part because it is transparent, you are seeing light kind of bouncing into the canvas and coming back at you rather than just being a flat opaque surface. So I've got that established, and I might have to actually let that set up a little bit before I try to paint over top of it, because I do not want to muddy up the colors that I am going to layer over top of that with that color. So I may not go too much further with the rose in this sitting, and we'll see how that goes. But for right now, I'm going to hop on over to the purple flowers and just get a suggestion of some of that in there, because I do have this dioxine purple already established. I think I can use that for some of my darkest purples. I squint down. I again am not painting every little flower here. I am painting my values, and because I want to keep this a little bit lighter in value, even though when I squint down, some of those purples are very, very dark. I don't think I want that darkest dark in there. So I'm kind of boosting what I'm seeing a little bit and massing that shape rather than breaking it all up into a bunch of values. The shifts in value that need to be done can be done as a secondary stroke once I get some of these other things established. So let's see, get purple down in here too. Okay, and that's about all I want to do for that particular purple. Again, depending on how I want to approach this, I can start to work other colors right into that right off the bat, or I can let this kind of rest, and so that when I start layering over top of it, I don't intermingle my next layers of paint in with that color. So at this point, I'm just going to kind of let that sit a minute, and I'm going to move on to the green foliage. I'm going to start with that olive green because it is such a deep dark green, but it is also transparent. Just a little tiny bit of mineral spirits at this point of the process because it helps to allow the paint to really move along. But see, that's the nice thing about this olive green is, again, because it's transparent, it can create a variety of different shapes and edges all just within itself because of that transparency that's happening with it. So again, you know, keeping it pretty loose at this point especially. Have a little bit of green in here I'm going to add in. And down here, same thing. It is a color that you can actually create designs and patterns with by determining the volume density of the paint that you put on there. So see, I can almost create the entire leaf just by adding or subtracting more of that pigment in there. It's really such a lovely color for that. And I do have a little bit of a leaf peeking in over here, which I think is kind of important. That will help make things more interesting and balanced. Okay, I still haven't quite decided what I want to do with the background. The backing that I put on it is really just a black, but I don't think I want to go that dark with it. Based on what I've got going on there now, got the orange, green, and purple. I want to be careful not to introduce too many other colors. I think I will try that ultramarine blue with some of that purple in with it, so it makes it a deep purpley blue. Tinge of the white in there again because it's so dark without it. And let's see how this works. as actually my darks in my background. And let me change this, but I'm going to start with this and put in some of those negative shapes there around those sort of leafy brackets. Use some of those edges of that furthest away flowers in there, right into the background. Might as well do that right off the bat. Get that kind of established a bit. Soften those edges so they go away. Okay, mix up a little bit more of that color. It's okay. I have to continue to mix a new batch of color, and it's a little tiny bit different unless you're working on a very specific section of a painting for some reason. Trying to color match, it really can add a lot more interest if all of your color sections aren't exactly the same. So not a problem having to remix a little bit of paint. Now this side is lighter, so I think I'm going to drop down here and get underneath the flower where it's still pretty dark. I'm actually going to add a bit more of that ultramarine blue right there so I can really get it dark right where it touches and lays on the table. And a little bit lighter over here on the side where the light source is coming from, and it's lightened that up. I also did try to make it a little bit warmer. My light source is really full spectrum, so it kind of has elements of all the lights and the cools in there, but I'm going to work more with the warm light, cool shadows sort of palette. So again, just pushing what I see one direction or the other, just as I do when I'm creating my design or considering my values. Finding which direction, a lighter or a darker, a warmer or a cooler, works best within that particular area, and then pushing it that direction. I like to paint negative shapes like the sky holes in trees, or the shapes around tree branches, or like in this case, those shapes around those leaves. Rather than painting the leaves over top of it, I like to do the negative shapes. I think it creates a lot of interest that way, but I think it also forces your brain to see the negative parts of a painting are just as important as the positive parts. So I'm getting, I think it's been pretty. It still hasn't really started to develop into much as far as the final designs of the painting, but definitely got some very beautiful colors and shapes already happening in there. And this, I mean, this is the beginning where you say, does this composition work? Are these shapes working? And make some adjustments. And right now, I'm thinking I'm pretty satisfied with both. The flower kind of looks like an egg, but that will change. I think I'm going to go even darker there with my background in a couple of those areas right around those branches. Around those leaves. Right immediately around the flower and through here. I do that just by not adding any white to that mixture of the purple and the blue. What that does is just gives my background a little more depth and dimension behind it. You can really see, like you're really seeing way back deep there with that. And all of this is negotiable as I paint. I can change my mind. For right now, this is where I'm going with it. And I'm happy with it. And this might be a point to where you would think about stopping and letting it all rest. I have covered the entire canvas, well, pretty much. And I've gotten my shape down. I've solved the problem of my composition and my general color scheme, and now everything is going to be building on that. And so it will depend on whether I want to work alla prima, which is wet into wet, in which case I may want those colors that are on the canvas to intermix with what I'm putting on top of it. And if I do that, I really like it when the paint is still wet underneath. If I don't want things to intermix too much, particularly if I am putting let's say, for example, I were to be putting a blue over top of a yellow, but I want the yellow to stay pure and not become green, I am going to have to allow that underpaint to dry a little bit before I start layering over with the blue. So every painting is just full of those kinds of decisions. On my palette, I also tend to keep a pile of my leftovers from the past paintings that I've done, and those become like a mother pile for my gray, which I really enjoy using. And I want to get a little bit of that gray. I squint down again, I'm seeing a gray right in this shape here. So I'm going to get that put in there. Really working with very, very simplified shapes at this point. I don't want things to become overly complicated, and I will be making, I start out with large shapes and break it down. So these are my largest shapes, and the next step down will be making some of these shapes a little smaller, and so on, continuing to break it down that way. I'm actually seeing a little bit more of a, it's really more of a burnt sienna into the core there, but it might need to be a little bit more intense than that, with a little bit of that cat orange mixed in, and definitely lightened up a little bit. I'm seeing that color down in here. I haven't really started to layer the paint on too thickly yet at this point. One thing that I am seeing, and I don't want to lose that, is that one area of sort of yellow glow down in here, and I think I'm actually going to do that by a reductive process, which is basically taking a little bit of color on your dry brush and removing the color on there. Okay, let's go with that for right now. That petal. Don't want to nitpick too much on any one puddle here, so I'm going to keep moving on into the other elements of the rose, and really squinting down and seeing this whole mass as pretty much one shape, one color, other than just a few highlights and one very dark area right in there. That very dark area looks to me almost like an alizarin crimson, so I'm going to put that in and get that established. Let's leave it about there. And I see that same thing kind of winding around in here, all the way down into the very core here. And in here, just sort of still continuing to establish my roadmap, but just starting to break down a little bit into the shapes. I've got quite a dark area in here. Still working with that same brush, and that is something that is, you know, just, I guess you'll say my thing. Every artist is different, so if you feel like you need to be switching brushes in order to be kind of creating some of these different strokes, then that is perfectly okay to approach that way. I just really like this particular brush because I feel like I can choose so many different types of brush strokes with it. I think maybe I'm going to try and introduce some of this color. No, that's too dark. Maybe not intense enough. This is quinacridone rose, which is a beautiful pink, also transparent until mixed with white. As long as you don't add too much white, it really makes just this absolutely gorgeous sort of rose color. That has to be the Rembrandt color. I have tried it in other brands, and it just did not have the same level of beautiful intensity, so I always insist that that color. Most all of my transparents are Rembrandt. This rose is already starting to move on me as it starts to open up a little bit, so I've got to just make decisions and stick with it and not try to keep up with the changes of the rose. Particularly as a plein air painter, you are going to find this kind of decision making is going to be very critical, and you're not going to have a lot of time to do it. Try and get that sort of tangerine color there in the core. Let's see. Not sure what the best approach for that is. I'm going to try mixing some of my cad orange. And I do have a, what's that called? Radiant Red. I think that's Radiant Red. It's what it's called by Gamblin. They have a whole line of radiant colors, which I really like to work with. They're something fairly new for me, but I enjoy them. Now I don't want to cover up all of my yellow with this, so I've got to be a little bit cautious about how I am applying this, but this seems like a good way to get some of that sort of peachy shade going in there. It seems to be working pretty well. Plus it is opaque since I added white in with it, so gotta keep squinting down so I don't forget and start getting too nitpicky with all of this. I can make adjustments and shifts of the color and the temperature. I'm not tied to anything specific at this point, but all decision making, just constant decision making. Just seeing the shapes, trying not to interpret too much what I think I'm painting, and just going, okay, there's a stroke here that has this shape to it, and this stroke has this shape. This is, again, some of that radiant red with some white added in it, because I'm seeing on the outer tips of this flower quite a magenta shade compared to what is happening within the core of it. I might have to adjust some of this. This can be, like I said, this is kind of a complicated coloration of a flower to paint when you've got these sort of shifts happening within the flower itself. So you might want to start out with something a little simpler, but it's up to you how you feel about it. What kind of a challenge you want to put on yourself? I'm going to have to add some of my lightest lights in here after things have dried a little bit, because otherwise I'm just going to keep pulling up the darker color from underneath. I don't have to describe everything. I'm going to take some of my Cad Yellow Medium, which is a very warm yellow. I've seen some of that actually in this. My temperature, let me see if I got it too light. I think I got that too light. Yep, I do. Okay. But I think I can use that over here. And over here. So it's going to mix in with what's already there, and that's going to neutralize it. This is a really pretty shape right here. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on defining that. I'm going to start by getting underneath of it again, creating that shape on top by what I'm doing on the shape underneath. Some of that intense peach color. Trying to see my I'm going to add a little bit of my phthalo, no, quinacridone rose in with my Cad Yellow Medium. Well, you know what, that's not Cad Yellow Medium, that's Cad Orange. Because I'm seeing a really intense orange right down the bottom of this petal. And there's even a really intense deep red that is bordering the top of that shape. Bring this all in to get a little bit more of a sense of oneness with my shapes and not get too broken up. Which is easy to do when you're painting a complicated subject. Suddenly you've got way too many different shapes and divisions happening. So I can kind of, some of this, feel a sense of uniformity happening to it. Excuse me. I have a really light, bright, cooler pink happening over here, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that until my paint has dried a little bit underneath. So I'm gonna suggest it as well as I can here with that. And the trick to doing that is to try not to mess with it too much. Lay your paint down and then leave it, because if you try to fiddle with it, you are going to be pulling that paint underneath up even more. It can be a little bit tricky. So a pretty rose that is lining these, which will again help to define them a little bit. Dark color happening down in there. I'm going to add a little bit of purple in with my alizarin to get a shadow right down in here. That'd be a good idea while you're painting your flower, unless you think you can get it all done in one day, to take a photo of things, because by tomorrow, even if you are able to still have a flower that's able to be painted, it may have changed shape an awful lot. So continue to see both value and temperature here. These are shapes. Decide how much definition of shapes I want to get in here. This side of the flower is cooler because it's away from the light. going to correct my shape on the outside a bit now. Again, probably based in part on just how it's changed as it's been opening up on me here. But I want to have it be the way I want it to look, so I can make those changes and adjustments as I want, because I'm turning it from a vase flower to one that's maybe laying on a tabletop. I need to create a nice dark shadow underneath there, and I also need to think in terms of kind of flattening some of those petals out because they have the weight of the flower on them. So we'll see how far I want to take that flattening out. I will be adding some more color into this background. This is definitely not going to be the final coloration that's in my background. I want my background to have more interest in this. I'm going to break up some of these edges just simply by pulling some of the background right across to the petals so I don't have these really sharp edges. Need some clean color, so be sure to clean the brush out. Purple flowers, I'm going to address in a minute here. Add a little bit of a warmer purpley pink in there. That's my Dioxazine purple and my quinacridone rose mixed together. Squinting down, seeing my values and my shapes. I'm getting too embroiled in each individual petal. Bring in some more intensity with that phthalo rose. The thing about painting flowers is usually you only have to describe one flower and a viewer sees all of the flowers as this same kind of flower. I don't even know what those are. Delphiniums maybe? I'm not even sure. Get some more definition in that a little later. And now I like to work with this green. What is this green? This green is Shiva. It's a Richardson Shiva Yellow Citron. And this works really well for bringing in some of my lightest lights into my leaves now. So far I'm still working pretty thin, and you can do this in different ways. When I work with my more abstracted landscapes, I tend to dive right into my really thick paint right off the bat, but with my flowers I tend to work thinner for a while until I've really established the shapes and the designs better, and then I can feel more confident in going in with more bold strokes. So just a little different way that I approach one subject over another. That one down there has some light colors bouncing into it, but I think it's mostly from this secondary light that I have shining, which I'm really not that keen on having in there. But in order to set up so that I could be able for you to see everything at once, I kind of didn't have the option of having a really clean light source for my setup, so I might have to make some of that up a little bit, but we'll see here. Cooling this off because it's clearly further away from the light source. And shadow, and shadow. I don't want the leaves to be overly important and take over the importance of my subject. So I keep them more neutralized. I will be introducing some more cast shadows and so on as I go along. The value in the rose is too light in that core. I need to pull that down, and I think the best way to do that is with that cad orange because it's pretty intense. Not if I do some of that phthalo, quinacridone rose, if you want to call it phthalo. Let's see if that's too intense. No, I don't think it is. Down so I don't see this again too individual. You can see I'm starting to get some more texture into things. I'm starting to utilize a little bit more of my thicker paint. Whatever your personal style is. I often work in a kind of a broad stroke, whether it is short broad strokes or long broad strokes. I don't know if that's explaining it well. By broad I mean solid flat rather than a tiny little dab, but sometimes it is done in a long length and sometimes it's just a short dab, but it's just one of the ways that I like to work. Down the paint that I put on there. Now one thing that I have here is I have my darkest darks and my sort of medium darks. I still have not built up into my lightest lights on here, and that's where you're really going to start to see the form and the shape happening. But I am going to come back at that because I need to give myself a little break right now. So I think that's as far as I'm going to do for this afternoon. And we'll be pulling in some more of this tomorrow when things are a little bit drier and I'm not struggling with trying to get pure, cleaner color over top. Working with temperature also, like we have discussed a little bit, to create those shifts of value using temperature rather than continuing to work with a darker and darker value. Okay, right now that's all I want to do, and it's kind of a real loose suggested start. I could continue to build up, but if I continue to build up, I'm going to have to start working with really thicker paint in order to create that. And that would be a commitment that I don't want to make right now. So this is where I'm stopping, and hopefully this has helped you get a start.